Okay, we are here with Dorothy Swazee on the afternoon of April 25th, 2015, and we are going to ask her some questions about her life experience with teaching violin, specifically the Suzuki method. So here we go. Are you ready, Dorothy?
I am.
All right. So here's your first question. How did you come to learn about the Suzuki method?
I remember seeing a TV program about some Japanese children running from the age of about 7 to 16, and they were so professional on the stage that you just were awed at that they get such ability at these little children. And I said, if I can ever find that out, I'm going to learn about the way these children play their violins as though they were professional people. So it seemed that not too long after that, I heard that there was a woman, a professor at the University of Stevens Point by the name of Marjorie Aper. And she had come from Japan to find out about Dr. Suzuki. And we were there for quite a while to get the instructions with Dr. Suzuki. And when we came back to the university, we were going to absolutely say that she, Marjorie Aber, were going to be teaching now for Dr. Suzuki for these kinds of children or grown-up people as well. And so this developed into an institute eventually where people came from all over the world to live, to learn there about the new kind of teaching. That's where we heard about it, and that is how I learned about Suzuki.
Okay. So basically, Marge Abers, is that how you say her name?
Yes.
She was a instructor at the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point who went to Japan, learned the techniques of the Suzuki method, and then brought them back to teach here at the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. Okay, very cool, very cool. Okay, so at what age did you learn to play the violin, and by what method?
This is a good question.
If I could interject, it's one of my favorite stories. Yeah, about who taught you how to play the violin.
I'm going to.
I know. I'm just saying, it's one of my favorite stories.
What do you want me to put?
I'm sorry. The question was, at what age did you learn to play the violin, and by what method?
Well, we'll start with my father had a violin, and he wanted to get one of the children to play the violin. And so I had asked, and when he was asking his children, who wants to play the violin? And I piped up and said, I do. And so we started out with my father, who didn't do too much about the violin, just enough to get us started. And then from that time, um, we were, my father had looked for people to teach my violin, but that was a hard thing to do because there weren't many people who knew how to play the violin. So this was my experience of becoming about 7 when I uh, learned to start the violin with a traditional way,
Mm-hmm.
and very hard and difficult to write to start the violin.
So you started to learn how to play the violin as early as 7?
Yes,
And your father got you started, right?
yes.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Did he know how to play the violin?
He must have known. He must have known some techniques because he knew how to get his violin in tune, and that's a difficulty in itself.
Yeah.
And so he knew that. He knew how to take the strings on the violin. He did know the basic things. And I want to just tell, my father was a very brilliant man in every respect, especially about music. And he would get records were real outstanding musicians, and he played a lot of music around us.
Mm.
And he said, when I was struggling in a simple piece, he said, don't ever forget that even the most difficult or simple music that you do, just remember it can be the most beautiful thing if it isn't, even if it is a simple piece.
Okay, so what age do you think is ideal for a child to begin learning to play the violin?
Well, that's a sort of a mixed question because right now I don't think it really matters if you're doing the traditional method. But with Suzuki, that's a totally different thing. The Dr. Suzuki said, I, it should, you can even teach your child in the womb and begin to learn with the youngest child you can get a hold of, because the learning of the age from the womb to 6, that is the best time for a child to learn, and especially music.
Okay, I'm curious. Talk to me about learning how to play while a child is still in the womb. Is that about learning about like playing music to the child and that sort of thing?
How we happen to know this, Dr. Suzuki was coming to the home of one of his students, and had a boy that he was starting, was a young boy, and these pieces that he had uh, teach uh, would teach them again and again and again until they memorized these pieces. And while he was teaching this little boy, he said the baby stood up and started in his crib and was calling out and trying to tune this instrument. And that's how Dr. Suzuki discovered that he can teach this child even when it's a womb.
Hmm.
And so we learned from Suzuki that he's got children from the age on up from there
Mm-hmm.
because of the how he finally also discovered that by using a record that we could listen to. And this way, this is helping the baby or the womb is learning that even before he starts to birth.
Ah, okay. All right. So, the next question I would have for you is, did your children learn to play via the Suzuki method? And if no, why?
Oh, I think that's a good question. Uh, Number one, this is a new discovered method, and uh, it's very not too um, good for them to be older children. It's better to get the child at a young time,
Mm-hmm.
which by then my children had discovered their own uh, interests.
We were too old for it by the time you learned about it and got involved in it, right?
That's correct.
So you were just stuck with a son that tried to play the baritone saxophone, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
terrible thing. Terrible. Tell me about meeting Dr. Suzuki.
Yes. That was a really experience that was, well, my fortune because we didn't see Dr. Suzuki much, but the we were talking about that this interest of Dr. Suzuki had developed into at my university in Stevens Point had developed a thing called the Institute, and this would bring people from all over the world that could come at this institute. That would come once a week or 2 weeks, and the people that were teachers of very extraordinary ability would be children could come, parents could come, families could come and go to the institute, and then this would be teaching that would be going on at the institute and go through the 2 weeks. And all these teachers were to study with the children that come into the institute. And at the time, we were so fortunate of this 2 year at the institute. We had Mrs. Suzuki and his husband, Dr. Suzuki. And so Dr. Suzuki would go through many of these classes with the students so that they could watch Suzuki, how he would play. And then the second week was especially, or just mainly for the teachers. And so I happened to be fortunate to be in some of his classes. And at the end of the term, Dr. Suzuki had all of the teachers that were being taught at the week. It showed us a picture all sitting there. So he happened to be in my class.
Ah,
And so that's how I happened to meet him.
that's pretty sneaky. Okay, so what are your fondest memories of teaching violin?
I think it changed my whole world, and I think it is probably the best part of my life was being teaching Suzuki, because it's so totally different, and there is no such thing as you don't start with exercises as a traditional method. You don't make these grinding things that agonize other people when you're working, trying to learn a lesson or a notes or whatever. When my mother once said, she said, when I grow up, she said, oh, she said, I could kill somebody for the when she teaching my child, or I grew up. That's how bad the traditional method was.
Mm-hmm.
And where were we back to?
So would it be fair to say one of your fondest memories about teaching violin would be that you think the method was so much better that it gave people a lot of enjoyment from being in it? Is that what you would say?
Yes, absolutely. It's the most, the children were so much fun. They were so little. My youngest student was 1.5. And even when they were that little, the privileges and see these children that you cannot, they could not keep their attention, or they had kept having a hard time when they were so little, and you won't develop them in a month. They could keep their attention for as much as a half an hour, which is incredible. And so that's what made watching all of these things happen, and that we learned from one person, Dr. Suzuki, that we had learned how to play the hardest things, and gradually, little by little, the music came. The lessons would develop beautifully, and you just everybody enjoyed the fun.
Mm-hmm.
The parents enjoyed it as much as the children.
So it was the whole environment of teaching that was enjoyable, camaraderie and seeing people advance. It's kind of the whole thing, right?
Well, I tried to. Dr. Suzuki had a book, first book, and several others too. But it was mostly the principles of the things that you should do if you want the things happen for these development. So I'm wondering what I should do next.
No, I think that's good.
Oh.
I really think that's good. The idea about to fill it in is the idea of developing people.
Okay, all right. Well, this thing that Suzuki had developed, if you really followed his method, used his book, listen, and learn from your professor. Excuse me. This was asked, and I tried this with, we wanted to do in our group, that the teacher should learn to play the violin
Right.
for 1 year, or the first book. Now there's 10 books were in this, and so everybody was using the same playing with their, starting with the book first, and so the teacher or the parents, it could be the father or the mother, and they were to be the teachers at home.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so they would take notes as you go along.
Right. Okay. So, did you, out of this process that you're talking about, did you have any students who were exceptional or stood out?
Well, it's interesting that they did, there were students. I had one boy at 6, and and it's hard to talk about people having talent, natural talent, but there's some people that don't have any, but they want to be a musician. And so I noticed this one boy, and when we first started out with the children, they played, they had a little margarine box or something that shape to put on under their chin so they hold their instrument by is taught that way. And this young boy, his parents were totally, they of course helped the boy a great deal because both parents were enthusiastic. And so he said his parents would say to him, "Get this instrument down. He's doing enough for today." But he had no natural talent in music, but he worked, and he worked. Well, we don't really call it work because they enjoyed doing it, or they wouldn't have been doing it so long. But he did end up, except he was going on with his music, developed his music, and was going to be a professional player. But there was a terrible thing that happened to him. His play, when he'd grown up, his roommate had pushed him and cut his left hand so badly that he couldn't be, he was an excellent player no matter what. But he is now, that person is now developed, he's a business of a symphony near Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've had others, and the things that some of them do, the letters I've gotten from students are so wonderful. And that I have one boy that's in a symphony. I don't know how long. They move from different groups.
Mm-hmm.
So I've gotten letters that tell how much I appreciate them and what they did. But I think I really want to say to everybody that everyone has a talent. And I don't think there's anything that where people have to have a musician. And that's not really the idea back of this at all, is to be a musician. That's what it is really the meaning of starting by telling that you that you learn. That's what Suzuki is all about. To
Learning.
teach you how to learn. And all of my students that I know about have have had wonderful careers because of the training from Suzuki.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, last question. You ready?
Yeah.
How do you think the method has changed since you taught Suzuki?
Oh, it's remarkable.
So you think the method has changed a lot since you
I
started
don't
teaching?
mean the changing, but what has happened is, see, why they started out with a violin is because Dr. Parents had a violin factory, and they had all sizes, and that's why you can start with the very little tiny violins, is because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when everybody in